what's your thoughts about the post-workout anabolic window?
I think peri-workout and especially post-workout nutrition, it started out as a conversation that was reactionary in the last, I would say, 10 years, to where we had science that was accurate, but perhaps limited, and there were some overstatements without context, and you would hear things like, getting protein and carbohydrate in and around and perhaps during your workout was more important than the total amount of nutrients you had in the day, without any context for what that goal is, right? And I would say that's probably true for a multi-stage endurance athlete, right? If you're competing in multiple events in the same day, the actual fuel availability is what's important rather than just the total amounts, right? Because we're not looking at long-term adaptation. We care about how you perform on the day of your triathlon, for example. However, the loudest voices seem to come from the place where it mattered the least, which would be like the bodybuilding community, to where your acute performance has been shown time and time again in research to not be that dependent on, say, pre-workout carbohydrate. And now that more research is coming out, the adaptations to training seem to be more related to total protein intake versus whether or not you got protein within the hour prior or after. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not important at all. It just means that the metabolic demands of your sport are going to dictate the importance of peri-workout nutrition. So I'll speak from my perspective as a strength and physique athlete, coach, science communicator, and athlete. Peri-workout nutrition is kind of in the middle rung of importance relative to other things like energy balance, total macronutrients, ensuring micronutrient quality, etc. And it's probably a good idea to get protein in and around your training. You probably want to consider pre-workout nutrition if you are dieting and or training first thing in the morning after a long fast. We have decent research to show that's a time when you might actually not perform quite as well, or blood glucose could be a little less stable, or muscle glycogen could be a little lower to the point where it might affect training, maybe. But for the most part, total protein intake and understanding that the time course of digestion in the real world is much longer than it is in the acute studies that formed the basis of the hypothesis that the peri-workout window was so important. So this is where it's important to understand how to read research and understand its limitations. So for example, most studies which the idea of the importance of protein around training was founded are 8 to 16 hour studies where people come in fasted and then only consume whey protein after a fasted training session. So the digestion kinetics are vastly different. And whey protein is the fastest digested protein, and you digest things faster when you're fasted, and also when it's not consumed with other foods containing, say, lipids or fiber, which slow down digestion and gastric emptying. However, if you were to say in the context of a normal day to have an omelet, and you're thinking, yeah, I need to get protein post-workout or 2 hours before training. Let's say that. Let's say you're going to train at noon and you decide to have an omelet at 10, a 3-egg omelet, right? And you're thinking that's 20 grams of protein. I've read that 20 grams is all I need. I know egg protein is highly bioavailable and high quality. That's good to go. That'll be very important. The reality is 6 hours later, you're still going to be digesting that omelet. And if you had that omelet with toast, and if you had some other food with it, and if you had another meal before that, there's a veritable conga line of food that needs to get digested before those amino acids are no longer available. So, man, like lean steak, 6 hours. Mixed meals, even longer. So the conditions that exist in some of these acute studies are not realistic. And then also they're measuring an acute measure that's a proxy for something else. Muscle protein synthesis is not the same thing as actual hypertrophy. And a snapshot during a 30-minute period post-training is not reflective of the overall skeletal muscle remodeling that is going to result in adaptations that we care about. So I would say for the most part, yeah. And not only does it scale to the metabolic needs, it scales to how important and how extreme your goals are. If I'm talking to someone who's just trying to balance all the information and adopt a lifestyle that includes lifting, I just tell them, hey, make sure you're getting in, at least 0.7 grams per pound of a body weight of protein, or 1.6 grams per kg of protein, depending on if you're metric or imperial system. And then, try to have at least 3 square meals a day that have a protein serving in them, develop some structure and habits. If I'm talking to a competitive bodybuilder who's definitely already doing all of that, I'd say, yeah, I would also make sure that one of those meals happens 1 to 2 hours before and after containing protein, because we want to maximize every potential pathway to hypertrophy, because you're a competitive bodybuilder. So that's or powerlifter or weightlifter or sprinter or thrower. So those are different situations. And now it's more like what return on investment is worthwhile, right? If I overwhelm someone who's new to lifting and is just starting to form a habit, they very well might not form that habit at all. And I've done them a disservice by giving them 8,000 pieces of information that they need to try to change their life with, and they throw their hands up and go, man, this is too complicated. I just wanted to lose 10 pounds and be able to play with my grandkids. But if I'm talking to someone who is willing to invest anything in their mind to get better performance, then I can start talking about those more minute variables.
Interesting. So it comes around to make it simple. Simplicity.
It does. What's your goal?
Yeah.
What are the metabolic demands of your sport? And understand that the priority is scaled to those, and what you're willing to invest and what you're expecting.